you enjoyed the beginning of the video. I'll continue to work on those leaves. What I'm trying to get across is those oak leaves are really valuable in the garden. Why let them go to waste? So I'll continue to chop those up and put them on top of the roses. At the very least, what I'm trying to do is just add organic matter to the soil. So I like to use a wood-based mulch. I like to put down anything organic that I can. That certainly includes cottonseed meal, alfalfa meal. But with those chopped up leaves working their way into the garden, worms love them and they just break down into a nice organic matter. I'll include some pictures at the bottom or end of this video. In New York, I used to collect bags of leaves because we did not have many trees in our yard that produce leaves. So I would collect them, 20 or 30 of those brown paper bags, chop them up. They usually would only be 10 or 15 bags after that. And the reason why I kept them in New York was different. I used to put them around the base of the rose to protect it from winter cold. Here in North Carolina, I just pretty much put them on the beds, but we're predicting a temperature of 19 in a couple days. So you see how that bud union is above the ground. I am going to put some leaves around the bud union itself, specifically some of my newer or more tender varieties. For example, Marilyn Monroe. I have lost this rose before, and you can already see that it suffered some dieback this winter with a couple nights in the mid-20s. So this is a tender bush. It has been here for about, I think, 2 years, so I'm not overly concerned. But what I'm going to do, in addition to putting some of the chopped up leaves in the beds for organic matter, I'll pile up some leaves around the bud union, and I'm going to add a little bit of compost. This is something I usually do not do here in North Carolina. This is something I did up north. Our bud unions were planted below the ground, but we would have temperatures commonly below zero a handful of times a winter. Here in the south, anytime I get a temperature below 20, I become concerned, especially something newer. This is Ring of Fire. Again, here's the bud union. It is above ground, and this variety has only been in the ground, I think, about 1.5 years. So this bud union is pretty mature, but since it's above the ground, I'm a little concerned with it. And I can't remember the exact lineage, but Ring of Fire, I think it has some Marilyn Monroe in it. You can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but regardless, it's either St. Patrick or Marilyn Monroe in its heritage lineage, and it is a tender rose. So my two most tender roses in the garden, Marilyn Monroe and Ring of Fire, I'll put those chopped up leaves in compost just to be safe. So I'm gonna get at it and I'll show you the final result. So from those pictures, you can see I'm all done chopping up the leaves. For the most part, you can see they become a pretty shredded mixture. There's a couple whole leaves here and there. I'm not worried about them. The reason why you chop them up is it'll help them break down quicker. In fact, if I just throw this in as a kind of a mulch in the winter, it'll pretty much disappear by late spring. And don't think that it just disappears and it has no value to your garden. Again, it's adding organic matter. Worms love it. And if you've got leaves on the property, highly suggest you incorporate them into your beds. If you live up north, I highly suggest you put them around the bud union of your rose. Even though that bud union is a couple inches below ground, when you live up north, I had very high success rates of never losing a rose in the winter when I mounted them up, usually about 6-8 inches high with chopped up leaves. And you might wonder, well, do they blow away? Eventually, especially after the first rain, they kind of get matted down a little bit, but since they're chopped up, they're not matted so much that it promotes disease. Quickly, before I do the leaves, that's what I'm talking about. A few of my newer roses or more tender roses. I live in eastern North Carolina now, so I'm not going to do all of them, but this is Ring of Fire, one of the newer roses that is really good. It's new in my garden and it's winter tender, so I just kind of mound that up 6-8 inches, just dump it in the middle of the rose bush. What I'm trying to do is protect the bud union. That's the actual graft. So the graft is Ring of Fire. If it dies all the way back to the graft, either the rootstock comes back or the whole thing is lost, and I don't want that. So anything tender in my garden, Cajun Moon, Ring of Fire, Marilyn Monroe. I had a little bit extra, so I put it on the newer roses, Gemini and Moonstone, but those are on Multiflora from Palatine, so not too concerned with losing those. So I'm gonna finish up here and I'll show you what the garden looks like. Now I'm just gonna pretty much spread these leaves evenly throughout the garden. All I'm trying to do is get rid of this pile of leaves. Rather than send it to the landfill to recycle as a compost, I want it in my beds. But again, the point of this video is not only does it add organic matter, if you got a little compost, you got some leaves and you mount it up around your bud union, it can also offer some winter protection. For me, we're gonna be 19 in 2 days. It's 68 today. I wanna get these roses ready. All right, all done. The pile of leaves has been chopped up and moved to the rose beds. I decided to do something a little different. I was just going to spread the leaves out through the beds themselves. If you think back earlier in this video, I put some compost piled up by the Marilyn Monroe, and then I put some compost by the Ring of Fire. I topped those with leaves, and I said, you know what? Why am I gonna just spread it willy-nilly through the garden? We're gonna be 19. A rose like Mr. Caleb has been here for almost 5 years. It's well established, should be fine. But why not just go the extra mile and just mound up some leaves around the base of each bud union? And that's what I did. I didn't have exactly enough for every single rose. Roughly a wheelbarrow full of chopped up leaves covered 6 of my roses. So I had about 6 wheelbarrow fulls. I started with the roses I cared the most about. I shouldn't say I care about any more than others, but you know, you've got some favorite roses. So Randy Scott, Gemini, Hot Princess, Veteran's Honor, some of my really good ones. And then I did ones that maybe weren't quite as established. 2 in the back are Maverick and Cajun Moon. And then I got to the fragrance bed. And it's not that I don't care about these roses, but you know, I picked Pope John Paul II. I picked European Touch. It's not a fragrant rose, but not a lot of people have that rose. So if I lose it, that could be it. So I started to get picky with the roses I covered. And then other ones like Secret and Fragrant Cloud. I don't dislike those roses, but I just, they're in commerce. I could replace them if I had to, but we don't expect it to get that cold. Anything mature in this garden should be just fine. But instead of just spreading it through the garden like the original plan, I mounded it up. And Ring of Fire, Cajun Moon, Marilyn Monroe, some more tender ones, I just covered up the compost with some of those chopped up leaves. Is it perfect? Probably not, but it's got about a 4 to 6 inch covering around the bud union, and we're gonna be 19 just for one night. We're not talking about weeks and weeks of cold, so I think that's gonna help it. It's gonna hold in some of the ground temperatures, kind of modify them. We're actually 68 today, so our soil temperature is pretty warm, so the whole idea is this will just kind of retain some of the warmth on our cold night and maybe help things out. Is it gonna hurt? No. Other than my back or a little bit of effort, this is gonna eventually fall down into the ground and break down around the rose itself. So still, you know, making sure that I'm adding organic matter to the soil. But since we're gonna be quite cold, 19 degrees here coming up for a low, I know you northerners will laugh, you're cold all the time, but pretty big difference when you're 68 on a Sunday and you've got leaves coming out, and on a Tuesday morning you're gonna be 19. So you can laugh at us for only, you know, 19 degrees might not sound cold for you, but it's pretty hard on the plants. Let it be known that I've lost more roses because of winter kill in the south than I ever did in the north. One of the reasons being the grafts are above ground. Another reason being we don't go dormant. We're like this, and we could have buds and, you know, flowers in the spring, and then we get down in the 20s, and that's much harder on a plant than being consistently cold. I thought those days of below 0 temperatures were harsh, but in reality the rose is dormant, you prune away the dead, and you might only have 6-inch canes in the spring, whereas I have a huge bush. It's really hard on the bush if you're up, down, up, down, up, down. And you can see it. We haven't had a cold winter, but I have dieback on the tips of some of these roses. This is Crescendo, so some of the more winter tender roses, mid-20s will do it here in the south, especially when you're 70 degrees days and weeks before. So that's it. Comment below. Do you have access to leaves in your yard? If you do you utilize them? And this could be a vegetable garden or a rose garden. Really, really good stuff. Now the next step, when we get warm again, I'll spray. Otherwise, not much to do until late February and March. I'll do a pre-emergent, but the roses have been weeded. They have been, some potassium has been put down, some pre-emergent, and we are good to go. We'll wait the cold nights and anxiously wait the warm, consistent spring days ahead. Have a good one, everyone.